Hello and welcome to Rulebreaker. Today we're going to take a look at another faction from Prophecy of Kings expansion for Twilight Imperium, and it's going to be the Argent Flight. These guys, their race is known as the Shikrai. They're like these avian bird people who have taken on the mantle of basically being, for lack of a better term, the guardians of the galaxy. Guys who are on the watch for the nasty Mahact gene sorcerers for their inevitable return. And now that that's happened, they're mobilizing and they're getting ready to become a power in the galaxy again. Alright, so these guys have a really nice starting setup. They've got 3 technologies. They're all from the base game. None of them are from the expansion. And of the 3, you have to choose 2. So you've got Neural Motivator, Sarween tools, and plasma scoring to choose from. So I'll just go through those briefly. Neural Motivator reads, during the status phase, draw 2 action cards instead of 1. Sarween tools here reads, when 1 or more of your units use production, reduce the combined cost of the produced units by 1. And plasma scoring, when 1 or more of your units use bombardment or space cannon, one of those units may roll 1 additional die. So obviously this is quite a big decision for the start of the game. I mean, they're all technologies that don't have any prerequisites on them. They're all starter technologies, as I would describe them. So you can get the third one of these that you don't pick in the first technology round if you choose to. My personal recommendation on this is to definitely take Sarween tools to reduce the cost of producing units in your first turn. And then it's a bit of a toss-up between plasma scoring and neural motivator, depending on what way you want to play it. I quite like action cards, so my inclination is to go for neural motivator off the top. But again, you can also get this in the first round, maybe for when you're doing status phase stuff. So it's not a guaranteed essential thing. And to be honest, plasma scoring at the start of the game, you're not likely to be using bombardment or space cannon in the first round. It's not impossible, but again, it's not a massive thing, right? So I would absolutely go for Sarween tools, and then just basically whichever of these 2 you prefer at the moment. One small thing to consider though when you are making your decision is that the Strikewing Alpha, their basically upgraded destroyer technology upgrade, has a prereqs of 2 red technologies, which maybe sways plasma scoring as being a better choice in the early game if you're intending to go down the destroyer route, which I recommend you do. It's one of the best things that the Argent Flight have. Alright, let's talk about the units that you get at the start as well. They've got a nice setup actually. They've got 1 carrier to carry around a whole bunch of infantry that they're going to have. 2 destroyer units. Now these are advanced, they're not standard destroyers, you'll see that in a second. They've got better stats and stuff. So they've got 2 of those going at the start. 2 fighters, 5 infantry. So their thing is that they've been recruiting for generations as many soldiers as they can for the event of the game with the Mahact coming back, and they're ready for them, and that's a nice thematic tie-in from the design team there to make that happen in the starting setup. They've also got a space dock and a PDS to defend their home system. So let's check that out. Alright, so this is what your starting system is going to look like. 3 beautiful planets, and I love these triple planet home systems. They've got Yllir, I don't even know how to pronounce that word, Avar and Valk. And when you stick your dudes down, you cover up all that beautiful planetary art, you start to realize that you can only go in one direction really at the start with your carrier. So you're going to really want to get producing as quickly as possible in order to explore a bit more and expand. Those destroyers, however, are really nice to have, and you'll see why in a moment. As for resources and influence, they've got a combined 3 resources and 3 influence, which is kind of standard. It's nice that it's spread out across 3 cards, so you can use them at different times. Like you want to spend 1 here, you keep the other 2 over there, and so forth. So you have a bit of flexibility with being able to spend those delightful planets. Alright, let's take a look at their race sheet here. So before we go into the racial abilities, I'll just call out the destroyer because it is really key. And starting with two of them is great. So if you were concerned about only having the one carrier, don't worry too much about it because your destroyers have capacity. Okay, they've got one capacity, and they also have combat of 8 going in. Normally this is 9, so this is a much better destroyer than the standard destroyers. And they've got two of them right at the very start of the game, so you know you can fly around in a few places right at the very start of the game. So that's good to know. As for their abilities, so they've got two. The first one is Zeal. You always vote first during the agenda phase. When you cast at least one vote, cast one additional vote for each player in the game, including you. So these guys obviously have a bit of political sway. So let's say you're thinking of voting in one of the agendas. Even just using one influence, like on one of your home systems here, home planets here, Avar, if you exhaust that and spend it, if you're playing a 6-player game, that adds 6 to the value, making that a 7, which is really, really good. In my experience with agendas and voting, unless it's really critical, there's not a lot of voting going on, so you can have a lot of power with a very small cost in the game if you're going to be doing this Zeal. Or else you could be making a lot of enemies at the table, depending on how you want to play it and how you want to phrase it. You also could use a bit of diplomacy to get someone's help, maybe get some promissory notes, deals going in some way with this power. So don't ignore that. I think that could be one of the main things these guys do. Their second ability is Raid Formation, and that reads: when one or more of your units use anti-fighter barrage, like their beloved destroyers, for each hit produced in excess of your opponent's fighters, choose one of your opponent's ships that has sustained damage to become damaged. So like basically this is an overflow of damage from any fighters. So if you kill all the fighters with your anti-fighter barrage, and you'll probably be doing this a lot with these guys, you can spill it over to things like dreadnoughts or flagships, for example. Again, this is another reason why investing in destroyers for the Argent Flight is it makes a lot of sense. So there you go, another combo for their Strikewing Alpha destroyers. Other than the destroyer units, they have a pretty standard layout, space dock infantry all the way up through to Warsun Cruiser. So let's take a look at their flagship. Alright, the Argent flagship, Quetzalcoatl. I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation of that. I know it's some kind of Incan or Aztec term. This is one of my favorite flagships. And it's entirely about the ability, and the ability is other players cannot use space cannon against your ships in this system. So basically what the flagship for these guys is essentially this giant shield for blocking space cannon PDS fire. The Xcha hate this. Lots of defensive factions hate this. This is the ultimate let's rock into someone's home, smash everything up flagship, which is what I like about it. It means that there is no guarantee to just sit back and haul in some points. You always got to keep your eye over your shoulder when this flagship is in the game. Like every other flagship, it has sustained damage, a standard cost of 8. It hits on 7s and has 2 dice, and a standard enough move 1 and capacity 3. So stats wise, not amazing, but you're bringing this in to do a heap of damage and conquer territory essentially. And I love it. I think it's going to be super fun and scary to play against when you're trying to defend your home. So I highly recommend getting this guy into the game, especially when you're on the offensive. Alright, let's take a look at the Argent Flight's racial technologies. So I already kind of showed you one of these as a troop tech upgrade, but let's first take a look at this one here, the Airy Hollow-Lattice. And that one reads: other players cannot move ships through systems that contain your structures. Each planet that contains one or more of your structures gains the production 1 ability as if it were a unit. Alright, so this is pretty good. You can build a wall in this game with your structures, essentially. Now, the thing about this is, the key word to this is through. Alright, your opponent's ships cannot move through. systems that contain your structures. They can still move in and they can blow them up from above, they can bombard, but they can't fly over them. Now, it's not very common in games that I've played where somebody would leave a bunch of stuff unguarded. But often that's the role of a PDS unit, is that it sits on a planet and it sort of shoots at things that fly by. In the case of having this technology in, which only has a single yellow prereq on it for the Argent Flight, you can slow down invading armies who are heading your way with this. If you want to create like a kind of a bubble around your home system, for example, it's a very viable thing to do. Particularly late game when you are close to winning and you don't want anybody taking your home system, you get this guy and you're slowing everybody down at the very least. So interesting in that regard. The other part of it, giving all of your structures the production 1 ability, that's awesome, because if you have enough counters on your board and you've got, like, again, a spread of PDS structures around the board, you can use them to build something, a ship, infantry to defend it, whatever you want. So I really like this technology. It's an early enough one, it's cheap to get going. You're probably going to have Sarween tools if you're taking my advice, so you can build it almost straight away. I don't necessarily think you need it straight away, but it is definitely something to look at and go for at some point in your game. Okay, let's take a look at the Strike Wing Alpha 2 in comparison to the first one. So as we showed you earlier, they already have a better combat than the standard destroyer, which is 9 and has 8. The second version ups that to a 7, and that's like the main stats thing on it. It does have the text as well. When this unit uses anti-fighter barrage, each result of 9 or 10 also destroys one of your opponent's infantry in the space area of the active system. And the anti-fighter barrage is then on a 6 is a hit, and you roll 3 dice. So just to quickly compare that to a standard number 2 level destroyer here, that would have worse combat than normal. It would still have the anti-fighter barrage 6 times 3, that's normal enough, but not the ability. So essentially this blows the extra hits over to the infantry in the space area of the active system. So again, space area is the key part there. That's not a planet, so it has to be people who are attacking you that happens to, or if you move in and attack like a carrier that's carrying a bunch of infantry, you can do some damage to those guys with the Strike Wing Alpha 2 as well. And that is their 2 racial technologies. Alright, moving on to their promissory note. The Argent Flight have one of the most interesting promissory notes in the game as well. It is Strike Wing Ambuscade, and that reads: when one or more of your units make a roll for a unit ability, again this is the person who you've given it to, not you, they choose one of those units to roll 1 additional die, then return this card to the Argent player. So unit abilities are things like bombardment, space cannon, and those kinds of things that are written on the cards. They're not normal attacks as far as I know. So what this does is it basically gives you an extra die in things like anti-fighter barrage or space cannon when you're doing those types of unit abilities. And an extra die can make a big difference. If you get this from the Argent player and hold it for a key moment, it could make a massive difference to your game if you're able to do damage ahead of a fight, say, or when attacking a planet from the air. So a lot of use can be gotten from this, and it doesn't really have a high cost to the Argent player to give it away. It's not giving a huge tangible benefit to everybody else. It has a high perceived value though, I would say. So shop that around during your game and you should get some people interested in it. Alright, let's move on to their additional units here, their leaders and mech units. The Argent Flight have an agent called Trelosa Aun Mirik, a commander called Trakan Aun Zulok, and a hero called Mirik Aun Sisiri. Thanks to the Twilight Imperium developers for giving me that tongue twister today. And they have a mech called the Airy Sentinel. So let's take a look at these in more detail. The agent has the ability, when a player produces ground forces in a system, you may exhaust this card. That player may place those units on any planets they control in that system and any adjacent systems. So yeah, this combos up again nicely with their racial technology. This one here, the Airy Hololattice, where you give your structures a production 1 ability. So that's pretty good. If you need to do it in a variety of different places, you can pick between them. Yeah, and that's available to you from the start of the game, so you can immediately start moving stuff around if you want to, if you have a reason to do that. Okay, their commander is unlocked when you have 6 units that have anti-fighter barrage, space cannon, or bombardment on the game board. Now, you're going to want these, particularly the Strike Wing Alpha units, which have the anti-fighter barrage. There's a whole bunch of those that you can get, and they're quite cheap, so you can unlock this guy really fast. I dare say you can probably do it. It could be round 1, it could be round 2, if you want to get it. And then when you unlock it, it reads, when 1 or more of your units make a roll for a unit ability, you may choose one of those units to roll 1 additional die. So essentially the same thing as the promissory note that we just talked about, the Strike Wing Ambuscade. And this is one that you can do as many times as you want by the looks of things from the card. So that's really interesting. Once you've unlocked this guy, you're boosting up your Strike Wing Alphas, for example, super quickly into really powerful units. It's really interesting. Their hero unlocks the same way as I think all the heroes do, where you have to have scored 3 objectives, and when you do that you flip it over and it becomes an action, flock migration from Helix Protocol, and the action is move any number of your ships from any systems to any number of other systems that contain one of your command tokens and no other player's ships, then purge this card. Okay, so this one really does tie in well with that flavor of flock migration. You can essentially take most of your ships from anywhere and put them anywhere that you have put one of your tokens that nobody else is in. Like, you can capture a system, kill everything in it, and then you could do this to fly ships from all over the place into it if you wanted to. Now, of course, you do have to abide by fleet rules. You can't exceed your fleet limit, but this gives you a chance to really just reshuffle the whole board if you want to, if you do it in a clever way at some point in the game, making them have even more control over creating a bubble or a wall around their home system if you want them to, or surround an enemy if you've made a big attack to go in for a second one in the round after. Lots of different applications for this already swimming through my head. I'm sure you guys have too. If you have any great ideas for it, mention them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And last but not least, their mech unit, the Airy Sentinel. Again, it's a 2 cost, 6 combat, pretty standard for a mech, and it reads, this unit does not count against capacity if it is being transported, or if it is in a space area with 1 or more of your ships that have capacity values and sustain damage. So basically comes along for free. Pretty good. Every unit helps when you are going to land on a planet, or if you want to take over something. And these guys, I think it's not a massively beneficial power. It's good, not great. There you go. And that is the Argent Flight. This commander is awesome. I love the Flagship. Big fan of the Strike Wing Alpha. I think these guys have lots of potential to do some fun stuff in the game. Yeah, so really hyped to give these guys a go. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you've played as them already, please give us a session report of some kind. That'll be fantastic. So thanks for watching. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I really appreciate it if you do that. I hate to ask, but it does help the channel to grow quite a lot. We'll keep more content coming. And appreciate you watching. Thank you very much.